Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show. It is episode number 9. In this show, we're going to pick back up where we left off in the last show. Residential property asset types and what to look for in them. The 5W's: who, what, when, why, and where. In the last show, we talked about why and we talked about what. Why invest in residential property asset types? It's tried and true. People need a place to live, and you're giving them a great place to live. So what? What type of residential property asset types? We talked about single-family homes, and we talked about multifamily apartment buildings or units. We separated multifamily apartments into 2 to 4 units and then 5 to infinity units. Now, there's one more very important thing when it comes to the what type of residential property asset type. Let's talk about that today.
Welcome to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, where you will learn about investing, the power of real estate investing, and how to invest in it. Whether you have the time or even if you don't, you're going to see it's attainable either way. And now your host, who always wants to share knowledge with you, Christopher Balcom.
Property classes. So residential property asset types, and probably this applies to other real estate assets as well, especially office space. They're classified into property classes. There's Class A, Class B, Class C, and Class D. Let's start with Class D properties. Class D properties are going to be approximately 30 to 40 years old or more. And let me say that all of this is approximate. Class A, B, C, D properties, the characteristics of these properties are going to be approximate because it can vary slightly depending on who you talk to, who you ask, or what data you're referencing, or the characteristics may be a mix between the properties. So all this is approximate. So again, Class D properties, 30 to 40 years old or older is the property structure. Typically, the property may not have been updated or renovated during that time period. It'll have substantial deferred maintenance. So even the ongoing maintenance of repairing things that get broken or fixing things that have just worn out due to normal wear and tear, all those things have been deferred or just not completed. And also larger system components, things that have a life cycle like a roof or a furnace or water tanks or generations of plumbing, those things may not have been upgraded, and because of that potentially have a shorter remaining life in those components. Additionally, there may be a lot of turnover at the property from the tenants for one reason or another. People are just continuing to come, continuing to go, and that requires a higher level of management, or I should say a lower level of management. Management having to be hands-on. And when I say management, like the property managers or whoever is managing the property for you, the owner and the investor, having to be very close and very hands-on with what is going on with the property because of the consistent turnover, having to try to fill those vacancies as quick as possible. Sometimes the property management or those managing the property can fall behind because of the consistent turnover. So that can lead to high vacancy for the property and for you, the investor. And high vacancy means that there is less income because the units are sitting unoccupied and there is no one in there to pay rent. Besides your own property having vacancies and a potentially high vacancy rate, the surrounding properties of a Class D property asset may also have a lot of vacancies. There may be homes around it that are largely vacant or other apartment buildings that have high vacancies as well. When you think of a Class D property, think of a place where it may not be at the highest or it is not on the highest place for someone to live, but they may need to live there out of necessity due to its potentially lower rental price. For you, the investor or owner, this Class D property will again probably require a lot of attention by you yourself or by your property management team or whoever you have managing the property day to day. Keep in mind that high vacancy means less income, which makes it hard to continue to fund ongoing maintenance or capital improvements such as renovations to interiors or exteriors. You may not ever get caught up or get it all done without a large or potentially large capital infusion into the property to catch up all deferred maintenance and perform capital improvements all or mostly all at one time. My recommendation to other investors, including myself, is only invest in Class D property assets if 1, you have that initial investment to take care of all deferred maintenance and capital improvements all at one time. 2, the property management or management staff you have in place to run the property really know what they're doing. They can really stay on top of the property to get it to where it needs to be and keep it there. And 3, that the Class D property is in a desirable location. We're going to get to location in a moment. Okay, Class C property. So if a Class D property is 30 to 40 years old or older, a Class C property is 30 to 40 years old or within that range. Some of the main components of the structure may be outdated, such as plumbing, the generation of the plumbing, electrical systems, and there might even be original appliances. Because of this, there's going to be some ongoing maintenance required, or certainly an outlay of capital, either immediately or over time, to catch up the maintenance on these systems or replace them altogether. This sounds a lot like a Class D property, so what separates the Class D property from the Class C property? Well, besides age, the Class C property should be a little bit newer than the Class D property. The Class C property shouldn't be as vacant as the Class D property. There shouldn't be as many vacancies. And overall, you should find the Class C property, when you first acquire it, less neglected in comparison to a Class D. A Class C property could be a good opportunity for an investor if you have some amount of capital to put into it and be able to reinvest the income from the property back into the property. It could be a great opportunity. It should cost less to acquire too, since it's going to require an investment in time and or dollars to get the property near today's standards. You might even get it to a level to where it's classified as a Class B property instead of Class C. Now, whether you choose to do that or not is going to depend on your goals and probably location, which again, we're still going to get to in just a moment. But first, I've got to tell you about Class B and Class A. What about those? Class B. Class B properties are about 20 years old typically. Well, I'll give you a range of 10 to 30 years old. They're usually well maintained, but in my experience, there's still some maintenance that hasn't been taken care of, or what I've been calling deferred maintenance. So there's still a little bit of that has been overlooked by the prior investor, owner, or managers. It'll depend on the layout and size of the property, but there might even be a couple of amenities, like a fitness center or common areas / clubhouses that can be rented or used by the tenants. A Class B property will cost you, the investor, a bit more to acquire, but it's the place people want to live, and it will demand a little bit more rent from the tenants. You may even have the opportunity to improve things a bit more at the property, improvements that your tenants want and are willing to pay more for. So we talked about Class D, Class C, Class B, and now Class A. Class A properties are typically or should be 10 years old or less, and they may even be newly developed, so brand new. It usually has little to no deferred maintenance. I remember reading an article or something some time ago, and it regarded or said Class A assets were the creme de la creme of asset types. Well, for who? For one, the tenants. Maybe for the investor too, depending on your goals, but for sure for the tenants. If you're trying to think of any property that you want to live in, the Class A property should have it. It has all the amenities, it's upscale, luxury living, great landscaping, an attractive rental office, an awesome clubhouse that you can use or rent, high-end exterior, the interior is awesome, it's everything you want it to be. Built with the highest of quality materials, it's probably regarded as the best, and people certainly want to live there. But it's costly for the tenant who's going to live there and also for the investor. You see, that's why I asked the question, who's it best for? It's creme de la creme, but who for? For you, the investor, it's going to require a substantial acquisition cost. It's going to cost a lot to acquire the Class A asset, typically. Now, the initial investment may not be such a bad thing. We learned in episode 4 about the power of leverage, where with the power of leverage in real estate investing, you don't have to have the entire cost or entire price of the property in order to acquire the property. With the power of leverage, you just need a fraction or a portion of the cost or price of the property in order to take ownership or acquire that property. But besides all that, the initial investment or the capital aside, that may not be a problem. That may not be a challenge. It sometimes is not. Sometimes the greater the investment, the greater the return, or the larger the return, right? And we are after a good return. So maybe the more we invest, the larger the return. Well, that's not always the case with Class A properties. You see, even though tenants are paying the highest rental or lease payments compared to B, C, and D class properties, the income from those lease or rental payments may not cover as much of the expenses in comparison to a B, C, or D class property. There could be more expenses related to an A class property. Examples of higher expenses could be additional on-site staff to support the vast amount of amenities, or at times the most expensive property could draw the most expensive property taxes, and depending on where that expensive property is located, that could have a great influence on the cost of the property taxes as well. You put all that together, more income from the tenants because of the A-class property, but higher expenses also because of the A-class property, you could end up with less cash flow, what's left over after the expenses are paid, in comparison to other asset classes. But we also learned in episode 5 that cash flow is not the only income opportunity for real estate investing. It's going to depend on your goals, as I always say, but it's possible you're not after cash flow immediately. You're more interested in long-term appreciation. Appreciation, which we learned, can come naturally or forced. There won't be much appreciation to force in a Class A real estate asset because everything's already great or the best. But there could be natural appreciation from rents that continue to go up over time because the asset is so nice, or the part of town that it's in that also continues to increase in value and development, and that could cause the real estate asset to increase in price as well. You, the investor, might then sell the property or refinance the property, which we talked about in episodes 5 and 6 as well. So your income may not come from the cash flow, but it might be more important to you to get it in the appreciation later. So what's the best asset class to invest in? Well, you already know my answer. It all depends on your goals. I'm sure you want some type of answer, and I can answer the question a little better after we talk about where. We talked about why, we talked about what. Now let's talk about where, and then I can give you a little bit of a recommendation. Okay, so where should the property be located? Should it be near where you live, where you work, where you play? Well, those locations might be okay. They might be nice. It might be nice to be able to drive by the property that you invest in. There is certainly some gratification there when you do that. Or maybe if you are an active investor, you want to drive by the property, have a look at it, make sure it looks okay. Check on the managers or check on the property managers, make sure they're doing their job that's satisfactory to you as the active investor. Or maybe you are a passive investor in the real estate asset and you don't have a role in the business, you don't have to do anything. You just invest and expect a good return on that investment. So maybe you just drive by just to look or just to have that gratification that you invest in that particular property or properties. So speaking of driving by the property that you invest in, it's interesting because when I talk with peers, others who invest also, it sometimes comes up that people just don't know that the properties and things that they drive by each day they could own or be a owner in or invest in. It really is attainable. It is attainable. And that's the name of the show, the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show. But it really is attainable. And when you do drive by the property that you own or have some ownership in or that you invest in, it is gratifying. Not just because you invest in it, but at least with residential property assets, you're meeting the need of people. You're giving or you're providing a place for someone to live, and not just any place, a good or a great place for for people to live. So you're meeting that need, and that is gratifying, and you're helping the community as well. Okay, so does the residential property asset need to be where you live, or where you work, or where you play, or where you go? Maybe there's some level of importance there, but it goes beyond that. And not just to the state or the province, or to the county or the city. I hear some say zip code, and now we're getting warmer. The zip code could be important. Sometimes in a city or town, you need to go beyond the zip code and down to the neighborhood. The bottom line is the property needs to be in a place where people desire to live. So there's all types of real estate assets and properties, but right now we're talking about residential property or assets. And I just said that you're providing people a place to live, a good or a great place to live. So your property needs to be in a place where people desire to live. So whether or not the zip code matters, it may or it may not. In some cities, you have to go beyond the zip code and get down to the neighborhood, because different parts of a zip code may be more desirable or less desirable than other parts. So the zip code would be important. The state and the county and the city, that would be important if those are desirable places that people want to live. Within that neighborhood or within that area, people who want to live there may consider things such as schools. If they have children, what are the schools rated in that neighborhood or that area? Depending on the area, the neighborhood school or the surrounding school district may be strongly coordinated with the location of where the student lives. So schools could be important if the people who are going to live in your property have children. Tenants may also be concerned about restaurants or stores and public transportation, or the proximity to those things. So can they easily get to restaurants and stores? Can they easily get to public transportation? These things are more or less important depending on the area. In some areas, there is a strong public transportation presence, and in some areas, it's not. So those things may or may not be important depending on the area that you desire to invest in. Tenants are also going to be concerned about crime, so that's going to be important when you're selecting an area that you want your investment property to be in. So schools, proximity to restaurants and stores and public transportation, the crime rate or criminal activities that ideally should not be going on around your property, those things are very important. Now for you, the investor, besides meeting the need of the people who are going to be there, you'll also want to consider your investment property to be in an area where there's population growth or job growth. And maybe those things go a little bit broader to the city or the state level and beyond the neighborhood when we're talking about population growth. Is there population growth in that state or that city or that town? Is there job growth? Is the community or the politicians or the private sector, are they bringing new jobs into that community, into that city, into that state? Those are things that you'll want to also consider as an investor beyond just the needs of your tenants or those that are going to reside in your property. Economic metrics such as population growth and job growth are important. Those indicators there and positive indicators there around job and population growth, those should allow your property to stay stabilized, being able to find good tenants when tenants do decide to leave, which lowers vacancy. And when there's less vacancy, there's more income for you and less expenses. One other area which isn't the most important for the tenants or you, the investor, but it may help you as the investor. It kind of ties in with job growth and population growth some, but that would be development. Is there development in the area? When I think of one part of development, I think of new companies moving in, or new buildings being built, or new restaurants being built, or new shopping centers coming in. Or the other part of development is maintaining what's already there. Are there streets being maintained? Is the landscaping being maintained? Is the city doing a good job in those areas to allow the neighborhood or the community to still be a good place for people to be, or a good place for people to live or reside? Now, just like the real estate property had different classes, A, B, C, and D, locations have classes as well, A, B, C, and D. Let's start with Class D again. So a Class D location is sometimes referred to as a war zone. It's somewhere that you may not travel alone, or at least most won't. Most cities, or especially metropolitan cities, have some type of area like this. When you see it, you will recognize it. Sometimes it's areas where there's a lot of crime or a lot of drug use or sales. Probably going to be some amount of boarded up windows, or we talked about the vacancy of the Class D properties earlier, that there may be a lot of vacancies. Some of those vacancies in a Class D neighborhood could be boarded up as well. I'll stop here and say that even though these classes of properties and locations are labeled the same, A, B, C, and D, for both properties and locations, doesn't mean that a Class D property has to be in a Class D location, or that a Class A property has to be in a Class A location. Properties can change and locations can change. So as one location can be redeveloped into a more desirable location or a more developed location, a property can be neglected by its owner or investment or property management or management staff, and it could fall from a Class A to maybe a B property, or a Class B property could fall to a C property, etc. So just because they're labeled the same, it doesn't mean there's a direct correlation between the location and building. Many times you'll find that it is, but it's not a hard and fast rule or requirement. So when we think about Class C locations, these would be locations that when we look at median income, this would be in the middle to low class. It's the middle to low class when it comes to median income. And there's some development, but the development in terms of businesses and restaurants might be like check cashing places or pawn shops. So some development, but the type of development that supports the people who live in the area. Class C locations may have some correlation to the age of the homes or the properties in the area, so they might be 30 years or older. Not always, but they may be, from their original construction, they may be 30 years or older. If Class C is considered middle to lower class areas, especially in terms of median income, then Class B would be middle class. I call Class B locations working class areas. Some may say blue collar workers and such, but I say working class areas. So it's areas that people work and they take care of what they have and where they live, and usually the neighborhood can show it. It should be okay schools in the area. It may be city schools or a suburban school district, but it should be okay to good schools in a Class B area, and decent restaurants and stores in development to go along with it. All right, so what's a Class A location? Well, Class A location has the newest buildings, the best schools, maybe the wealthiest people live there, the highest cost real estate, like we talked about the Class A properties, the creme de la creme, as I said I saw in an article some time ago. So a Class A location is similar to the Class A property. It's the best you can find. It's where you want to be. It's the hottest area. Maybe it's downtown. Maybe it's midtown. Different areas have different names for their different districts of their town or their city. Maybe it's midtown, but it's a really hot place. It's really popular. It's seeing lots of development. Every store or every restaurant wants to be in that area. Maybe there's not enough property to go around for the stores or restaurants to be in that area, but it's where the companies want to be and it's where people want to live. It's the area. That would be a Class A location. So what's Chris's recommendation? What's my recommendation? I'm really hesitant to say because it really, really does depend on your goals for you, the investor. In fact, that's the first thing I ask investors who come to me and want to partner or want to invest. But I'll tell you this, for my goals and for the goals of most of the investors that I talk with, Class B and Class C properties will typically get us there. They'll get us to achieve the goals that we're trying to meet. So now that we know about where, and we've already talked about what and why, what's left is who and when. So who? So this is going to depend in part on the where or the location of the property. For example, a real estate property, or specifically a residential real estate property like what we're talking about in this show, if it were situated near a university, probably going to attract students as tenants. versus families. Families may not prefer to live next to a university unless they're employed there, but students typically will want to live near the university. So if you don't want to work with students, you may not want to invest in a property near a university. If you want families as tenants instead, you may want to invest in a residential real estate property elsewhere. Sometimes people want to reside near their place of work. If there's larger employers in town, such as hospitals or medical systems or manufacturing or industrial, or maybe a company has moved their headquarters or regional office into town and that's going to employ a lot of people, locations like that might be worth your consideration when investing in residential real estate assets. But don't forget about the other things I mentioned too, like crime and schools. Those things are important too. Again, these aren't hard and fast rules, but just what you would typically see. There's age demographics, there's students, there's single people, there's married people, there's families, and this is who you will cater the property to, such as any improvements you perform or amenities that you bring. This is who it's for. So it is important to understand this. Internet or online tools from real estate sites like Trulia, they provide these demographics, such as in a general vicinity, what's the age group? What's the percent that are single? What's the percent that are married? What's the percent that have children? Median income, etc. So this information for general vicinities is publicly available. So I think you now understand who. What about when? When should you invest? Well, there's no time like the present. The world is still dealing with the COVID-19 or coronavirus pandemic, but there's still no time like the present. There might even be good opportunities from those who get scared out of the investments they have and decide to sell. So even in the midst of a pandemic or some other type of event like we've had in the past where the economy slows down and it's not related to health, but just the economy itself, these are often good times to find great opportunities. Don't let something like COVID-19 stop you from investing or stop you from continuing to invest. If it's not this, it'll be something else or some other reason that gets in the way and stops you from ever meeting your goals. Buy low and sell high, they say, right? There's no guarantee, but properties could be sold at lower prices during times like these, and great opportunities may be had. If you and your family have your health and your well-being, then get going. You will want to be a little conservative with your estimates for rental growth during a time like this, but there's no reason not to get started. And if you're already an investor, you already invest, there's little reason not to continue. When I say be conservative with your rental growth and such, when you look at the property you are going to consider purchasing, I'm talking about analyzing, and we're going to talk about analyzing in upcoming shows. But hold on. This show might be about over, but I don't want to wait until the next show to stop you from starting or continuing your investment journey today. And you shouldn't either. So if you have questions or need help right now, then reach out to me. I'm at neelyrealty.com/engage. That's NILEE realty.com/engage. As you leave this show, I've got two things for you to do. The first is take action. The knowledge I'm sharing is for you to learn as you educate yourself and then take action and do something with it. The second is don't keep all the knowledge to yourself. Share the show with someone else. And I look forward to seeing them and you back here next time.
You have been listening to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, sharing transparent knowledge on investing and the powerful impact real estate investing can have on your wealth and lifestyle. Follow or subscribe to the show using your favorite podcast app so you'll know firsthand when a new show is released, or visit neelyrealty.com/podcast and see the show there. That's NILEE realty.com/podcast.